Hello, my name is Ariel, like the mermaid. A while ago I got a comment on my video called Bisexual and Pansexual Erasure, and someone said, what about asexuality? And I was like, yeah, wait a second, that's a good point. That also is often disregarded, probably more so than pansexuality and bisexuality, and probably the fact that I didn't even really think to put it in the video kind of is evident that there is a lot of asexual erasure, and that's a huge problem too. Now, just a disclaimer before I really start this video, I'm not asexual and I'm not aromantic. I'm very sexual and I'm very romantic, so I don't necessarily know everything there is to asexuality or aromanticism at all, and I'm still kind of learning about it. So if there's anybody who's asexual and aromantic, and I fuck anything up, then write in the comments so I can correct myself and I can fix any problems and any misconceptions that I have about asexuality and aromanticism, because I might fuck up. Okay, but the first thing I think that is important to understand about asexual people and aromantic people is that there is a difference between asexuality and aromanticism. Asexuality is the lack of sexual attraction to people, whereas aromanticism is the lack of romantic attraction to people. Now, sometimes these two things can coincide, and there are people who are asexual and aromantic. However, there are also people who are one or the other. There are some people who are asexual but still are romantically attracted to a lot of people and have romantic and want to be in romantic relationships. And also there are aromantic people who are sexually attracted to people and maybe would want to have a sexual relationship with some people. But the main thing that's important to understand is both of these things exist. Both asexuality and aromanticism exist. And that's not a debate. There are people who are not attracted to people sexually, and there are people who are not romantically attracted to people. And a lot of people, I think, have the same attitude that a lot of people have when they're talking about gay people. And it's really kind of frustrating when queer people use the same kind of things that are said against them, when they say, if they say things like, oh, well, you just haven't met the right person that you're attracted to yet. You haven't been in a good relationship yet. That's not necessarily true. You don't necessarily have to have a sexual relationship, or not all of these people need to find the right person. They're just, a lot of times people can just know they're not interested in, they're not sexually attracted to people, or they're not romantically attracted to people. There are many misconceptions about asexuality and aromanticism. One misconception is that asexual people can't have sex. Now, this is not true. There are people who aren't necessarily sexually attracted to people, but they could choose to have sex with another person, and there could be a variety of reasons why. One, if they're in a romantic relationship and they want to give their partner pleasure, then they might want to have sex with them, and it's fine if they choose to do so. Two, they still might enjoy the physical pleasure that sex gives them without necessarily being sexually attracted to their partner. The thing is, I think that people need to understand there's different degrees of asexuality. Just because you're asexual doesn't necessarily mean you can't get physically aroused, or that you can't enjoy doing anything sexual. There are asexual people who masturbate, and there are asexual people who don't really masturbate. There's different degrees of asexual people, and there's different asexual people. Not all asexual people are the same, just like not all queer people are the same, not all trans people are the same. It's the same thing, not all asexual people are the same. Another misconception is that asexual people can't be romantic. That's not true. Asexual people, as I mentioned before, there's a difference between asexuality and aromanticism, and just because someone's asexual doesn't mean that they can't be romantically attracted to people and that they can't have a healthy romantic relationship with another person. At the end of the day, sex isn't everything that's part of a relationship with another person, and as I said before, asexual people can choose to have sex if they want to. Just because someone's asexual doesn't mean they can't have sex. but not all relationships are sexual, even if they are romantic. Another misconception is that asexual people and aromantic people are incapable of feeling love. That is completely not true. There's different kinds of love. Not all love has to do with sexuality, and not all love has to do with romantic attraction to another person. There's a lot of different kinds of love. There's the love you feel for your family, there's the love you feel for your friends, there's the love you feel for other people that isn't necessarily reflective of a romantic attraction to them, or a sexual attraction to them. Another thing is that asexual and aromantic people can still appreciate physical affection, and they can still enjoy being physically affectionate with another person. Just because they aren't romantically or sexually attracted to people, they can still have and can appreciate physical affection. Since asexuality and aromanticism isn't necessarily very common, a lot of people tend to think that there's something wrong with these people, but there's nothing wrong with not being interested in having a romantic relationship, and there's nothing wrong with not being interested in having a sexual relationship. And the social expectation is not just that you won't be in a gay relationship or anything, it's also that you will be in a heterosexual relationship. That is the norm, and there is an expectation that you're going to be sexual and that you're going to have romantic relationships. And there are some people that have that expectation and, really have the expectation that, like, for example, there are parents that really have the expectation, even if they are understanding about queer issues, they expect that their child is going to be romantically involved with someone of some gender. But that's not true for everybody. Also, just because someone is asexual or aromantic doesn't mean that they've had bad experiences with sex or with romantic relationships. Sometimes there are people that are just born that way and just aren't inclined to want to have sexual desires towards other people, and aren't inclined to really want to have a romantic relationship with another person. And at the end of the day, that's not always necessary for people. They don't always, that's not always something that a person needs to be happy. Now, an issue that has come up is the question of whether asexual people should be part of the LGBTQPI, etc. community, and whether they should be part of the queer community, whether asexual people should be considered in the umbrella term of queer and LGBT, that kind of thing. The thing that I think about that is, I don't think that it's my place, because I'm not asexual, to say whether asexuals should be considered queer or not. And I think that that's really, I honestly have no objection to asexual and aromantic people considering themselves part of that umbrella. I don't think there's any problem. At the end of the day, it doesn't affect me. It doesn't make like the issue of of queer rights any less legitimate if asexual people are recognized as an important group of people that is often disregarded. The only reason I think that it's possible that, and I think there are some asexual people who wouldn't want to consider themselves part of the queer umbrella term, and wouldn't want to be considered part of the LGBTQIP, etc. community. And there could be a lot of different reasons why. But what I would say is, if an asexual person wants to kind of consider, wants to identify with that, well, what's wrong? What's wrong with someone wanting to identify as queer, who's asexual? Certain queer people will suggest, oh, well, hey, they don't face the same oppression that we do. And yes, it's not the same oppression, but that doesn't mean that the oppression that asexual people face isn't necessary to address, because it is. There is a social expectation that you're going to be romantically attracted to someone, and that you're going to be sexually attracted to someone. And a lot of times the social expectation is particularly that you're going to be attracted to a person of the opposite sex, but it also affects asexual and aromantic people, and a lot of people treat people who are asexual and aromantic like they are less normal, or that there's something wrong with them simply because they don't have a desire to be in a romantic or a sexual relationship, or if they just aren't really attracted to people in that kind of way. The fact is, there are a lot of people who will make judgments about people who identify as asexual or aromantic. A lot of people will think that aromantic and asexual people aren't capable of love, as I mentioned, which is not true, or that they don't have the same empathy for other people that sexual and romantic people do, which is also not true. I think the reason why a lot of people have a discomfort with the idea of asexuality and aromanticism, but particularly why a lot of people have a problem with the idea of asexuality, is because they feel intimidated by the idea of someone not being sexually attracted to other people. And I think the reason why is because the fact is, particularly American culture is very obsessed with sex, but in a very weird way. You see, our culture really teaches us that everything is about sex, and sex is just everywhere. If you look at an advertisement, like the Super Bowl, which I'm not going to watch because I don't care about sports, but if you watch all the ads, sex, 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 it's all going to be sex. Maybe some of it won't be sex, but a good portion of it, I guarantee you, is going to be all about sex. You know, sex is present everywhere, but it's not, but at the same time, our culture also teaches us to be ashamed about sex and to feel weird about our sexuality. Particularly it teaches women to be ashamed of their sexuality, and just people who are also just people who are assigned as female and people who identify as female. All people. It teaches a lot of people that there's something weird about our sexuality, while it also teaches us that we should be sexual at the same time. So it's kind of sending us, there's a lot of mixed, weird messages that our culture sends us about sex. And so a lot of people strongly believe that people, of course, are going to be sexual, but at the same time they feel their own kind of embarrassment and kind of shame about their own sexuality. And so when someone else says, oh, well, no, I'm not really sexually attracted to people, they kind of find that intimidating, and that they find that threatening, that there's people who aren't sexually attracted to other people. And I think an important thing to remember is just because you don't experience something, and just because you don't necessarily understand something, you don't understand what it's like to be asexual, you don't understand what it's like to be aromantic, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And it doesn't mean that it's okay for you to just belittle and trivialize these people's experiences because you just don't understand it, because you haven't experienced it. There are people that probably think that asexual people just haven't, really figured out their sexuality yet, or they haven't, or aromantic people haven't figured out who they're romantically attracted to yet. And the thing is, sometimes that's true with any sexuality. Sometimes obviously we know that there are people who think they were straight, and they sincerely think they were straight because society tells them that they're straight. But then later they'll go like, oh, well, maybe I'm bi, or maybe I'm gay, or maybe whatever. And that's fine. And the same thing I mentioned in certain videos about pansexuality and bisexuality. Yes, sometimes people identify as bisexual or identify as pansexual, but then they identify as gay or whatever. Things like that happen. It does happen because sexuality is more complicated than we really think it is. And sometimes there might be some people that use it as a stepping stone, certain things as a stepping stone or whatever. But I think mostly it's just because people are told they are one thing, so then they come out as another thing, and then they're like, oh, and they figure it out. And it's very possible. I mean, I personally know one person who identified as asexual, but now he certainly doesn't identify as asexual, and he's a very sexual person. But, sometimes that's a sincere thing. People think because they haven't figured out their sexuality yet that they might be, they might think that they're asexual because they haven't really realized their sexual attraction yet, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's particularly with young people, but but understand that that's not everyone, and that's probably not even most people. Don't assume that. Don't, if someone says that they're asexual or says that they're aromantic, respect that and respect that that's their identity, and just assume, okay, yeah, they're asexual. They're not interested in a sexual relationship. They're not interested in a romantic relationship, whatever. It's just so arrogant of people to assume that they know more about a person's sexuality or they know more about someone's romantic attraction than that person does. And I just find that really... I just find that so strange that people have that kind of arrogance. Yeah, sometimes people, and with any sexuality, sometimes people identify strongly with one sexuality and they realize, oh no, I'm totally not that. That's okay, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, it's hard to describe sexuality perfectly and romantic attraction perfectly because it's more complicated than that. It's more complicated than how we try to understand the idea of sexuality with labels. But if someone identifies with a label, respect that and trust that there's a good chance that they're telling the truth.